everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my channel. Today I am diving into a new historical project, and specifically I am diving into the under layers of my overall historical project, which is going to be an 18th century Brunswick jacket. So a Brunswick, and I will dive more into detail when I actually go to make the Brunswick, but basically it is a hooded, often quilted jacket that was worn in the 18th century, but today I am actually going to be starting again with the underlayer, which are 18th century stays. If you've been around my channel for any real sort of time, you will know that I am desperately in need of new 18th century stays. I actually have 3 pairs going back to one of the first historical projects that I ever made, a fully boned set of stays based on J.P. Ryan's fully boned stays pattern. And then I have another one, which is a 1780s shape where it gives the more prow front. That one I think was actually a butterick pattern. And the third one was a pair that I did not actually make, that I won in a contest, but they're really just a little too short-waisted and probably a little bit too large for me as well. So I'm really hoping that this will be like the magical pair of stays that can last me for, you know, umpty years, and I won't ever have to make new stays again because I hate making stays. I've been putting this off forever because I don't like things like binding tabs and doing countless boning channels. So please bear with me with this video while I attempt to make these. This is going to be a multi-video project. I know that there is absolutely no way, even if I wasn't in rehearsals for like 40 hours a week, that I could make stays in a week. So you'll see the first part of the stays hopefully through like mock-up phases in this, and then you will see more in at least one, if not more, future videos. We'll see how long this project actually takes me to do. Please keep your fingers crossed for me. Keep me in your prayers if you do that, because oh my gosh, I am very daunted by this project. So anyway, the pattern that I'm going to be using is the Augusta stays pattern from Scroop Patterns. I have been wanting to use this pattern actually for a really long time, so I knew from the get-go this was going to be what I did. I purchased it directly from Scroop Patterns, and I will link Scroop Patterns down below. This pattern was made in collaboration with Virgil's Fine Goods. So I have actually already gone and printed off the pattern. It is a print at home pattern, and I have cut everything out. I cut out both versions of the pattern. There is a curvy version and a straight version of this pattern. Basically, does the difference need to be 10 inches versus 12 inches? And I'm kind of confused, to be honest, about which one I'm going to want. Based on the size chart, it says curvy, but based on the description, I was thinking maybe more straight. I feel like I'm curvy though, so I don't know. That's why I cut out both, and we'll just kind of compare and see which one I need. I also am going to be mixing the theatrical version with the historical version and doing kind of a hybrid of both and neither, because I really want stays that will lace up front and back. I just find that that is going to be way easier to put on by myself because this is spiral lacing and I can't do spiral lacing by myself in the back. So the historical version of these stays has a partial lacing about like this long that basically you can just loosen the bust for how much room you might need or how prow fronted you want it. I'm going to open that up and make the lacing go all the way down so that I can actually open it fully in the front. I think the main other change that I'm making from like historical versus theatrical is that the historical one is supposed to be made with 3 layers. So you have like 2 interlining layers of structure and then a 3rd layer that is like silk or something pretty, versus the theatrical one is 2 layers, both of which are just, I think, the structure layers. I have read part of the pattern instructions at this point, but not all of them. I promise I will read the rest of them before actually starting in on this, but I read enough to be able to choose or know the difference between theatrical versus historical. So that's what I've read so far. So yeah, I am going to be doing 2 layers of like just structure fabrics because I don't need this to be pretty and I'd rather work with less layers. I don't need silk stays. That just seems like a good way to wear out your stays quickly. I don't know. And the other thing I think that is the main difference is that pretty sure the theatrical one is machine sewn versus the historical one is hand sewn. I don't have time for that business. I will be doing obviously a lot of hand sewing on this, A, because it'll be a portable project that I can take with me to the theater for rehearsals, and B, because there's very little way to do a lot of this, like binding the tabs and all that, by machine. So yeah, this will be a combo, but like I'm gonna put my pieces together by machine because that just seems better. And I'm going to do my channels for my boning also by machine. I am using German plastic boning. I should have enough because last time I bought a 25-yard roll and this calls for 22 yards. So hopefully that will work. And let's go ahead and just start diving in and putting pattern pieces together, cutting things out, and figuring out how this all will work. So I'm having a bit of difficulty even just from the get-go here, trying to figure out like how much I might need to lengthen this pattern by, because I am holding up the front piece right here, and like basically the top of this, so this is the top edge, this is the seam allowance up here, and I folded it down, and the top of this should be just above like nipple height basically, and then it says that the waistline, which is not marked on the pattern pieces, the waistline should be 1 inch higher than the highest point of the tabs, which of course you don't know what the highest point of the tabs are until you assemble all of the pieces together. Because like if you look at this little picture right here, you can see that like where the tab is on the center front, basically where this center front point is right here, which I believe is delineated by these really dark lines where the tabs separate, but honestly I have not been able to find text saying specifically this is the stopping point. It says to like, when you're assembling the pieces, it says sew to the stopping point marked on the patterns. I think it's a stopping point, but it doesn't say that. It's just a dark line. So maybe I missed it somehow in my reading. I have now read all of the pattern instructions, so maybe I missed it. I don't know. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it says to stop here. But this part right here, as you can see in this picture, goes down lower than where the other tabs are that go around the side. So I don't actually know where the waist is on this side, and I'm trying to use this side to tell me how much I might need to lengthen it, which I'm pretty sure is significant because this does not seem very high, but this line is past my waist, so I don't know, maybe I should try and take a side piece and see where that is, like armpit to waist. Maybe that would be better, but then I have to figure out how to fold the tabs out of the way. Okay, so there is no actual side piece, and instead the side back kind of wraps around to the front over the hip, and then the side front, it's like, it's all on an angle. Do you ever get nauseous when you get stressed out? Because you know what? I'm feeling pretty nauseous right now about this whole pattern project right here. There's a reason that I haven't made stays since 2013. It's been 9 years because that was torture. Here I am torturing myself again while working 6 days a week, about like 50-something hours on theater. So, why am I doing this? I don't know. Doing this because I have to, because I need new stays. This doesn't make any sense. So this is like in the back. I think this is the side front piece, and I think like it is kind of here. But I'm also not sure. It says the stays should be low enough under the arms to sit clear of the front and back arm joint and prevent any poking or chafing. That's vague. How do I know where that spot is? I'm gonna go with lining it up with my jumper and see if that works, which, I mean, my bra is lower than that. We'll try the jumper. And then this kind of wraps to the front, and if I fold between the tops, well no, I need to fold 1 inch up to know where that is. So I'm going to draw a line 1 inch up from these two bold lines right here, because that's the top of the tabs, so that should be the waistline if I draw it 1 inch up from there. Okay, I've drawn in my line. I have folded on that line, so therefore this line should hit my waist with this under here. This is where my waist is supposed to be. Okay, it's probably hard to tell because I'm wearing a very patterned dress, but if I'm holding this up to my top of my jumper right here, this is my rib cage. Like, not even the bottom of my rib cage, smack dab in the middle of my rib cage, like where you would maybe wear a long line bra to, not my waist. So this means I have to lengthen this whole pattern by a really significant amount. And I was kind of just hoping that I wouldn't need to make any alterations to this, because the thing is that you can't try on stays. Like when you're fitting them, you can't. Because you have to bone the pieces, at least according to these pattern instructions. You have to put the boning in each of these pieces before you assemble the pieces. And then the last, second to last or so thing that you do are the eyelets or grommets, depending on whichever you choose, in these pieces. So like, there's no way to put the fronts, like no way to close this. You don't know what the pieces are gonna do, because there's no, like, you could take the pieces, I could take them right now, I could put them all together, like cut them out, put them all together, no boning or anything, but you don't know what that's gonna do, because it's like practically fully boned. I mean, there's a little bit of gap in between each of the bones, but not very much. And you just can't tell what, like, oh, this is a piece of canvas, what that's gonna do on your body, compared to, oh, this is a piece of canvas with a whole bunch of boning in it. And also the very last thing that you do is you cut the tabs, and like, you can't really try it on with the tabs uncut, because it won't fit over your hips, because like the tabs separate over your hips. Why did they wear stays in the 18th century? Why hadn't they figured out yet, at that point, that what they were wearing was stupid? Victorian corsets make so much more sense. Okay. Before I start to cry over this stupid project, I'm going to figure out how much length I need to add, and then I am just going to cut all of the pieces with that much extra length added and make this, and if it doesn't work, I'm throwing it in the garbage and never doing 18th century again. I am going to somehow figure out how to add 1.5 inches of length to the like interior of this pattern before it gets to the waist. I don't know how that's going to happen. I might literally just like cut the pieces and add that 1.5, or basically probably what makes more sense, trace the top half of the piece, move the bottom down by 1.5 inches, trace the bottom half of the piece onto the fabric, and we're gonna hope that that works. And again, if not, then I guess my garbage will have some new stays. Of course, now we have the next confusion with this pattern, because I'm comparing the straight pieces to the curvy pieces, which are underneath here, and it just doesn't make sense. For example, this is the straight back piece, and yet the difference that I'm seeing is that the straight one is actually longer than the curvy one, and also it is wider at the hips. Like, I'm not sure why it's wider at the hips. You'd think the curvy one would be wider. Then over here we have the straight one, which is significantly larger at the waist by at least 1/2 inch over here. And it does seem to be the same length. If anything, the curvy one is actually a tiny bit taller than the straight one here by like 1/4 inch. And then we look at the straight side back, and the straight one is again wider at the hips and seems to be just slightly taller as well. So I was going to cut the curvy one, but now I am not so sure. I guess that frankly for this back piece, it is that it's larger at the waist, not at the hips. I mean, it is in the tabs as well, but so I guess maybe that makes sense that it has a larger waist and therefore is less curvy. It seems to be mostly in the back piece and the side front piece, and then this one honestly is identical, or at least almost identical. This one is maybe like 1/4 inch larger. Yeah, I guess it is a tiny bit larger, which again feels like it's through the hips, but really if it's 1 inch up from here, then I guess it's the waist that it is larger in. Still don't know why this one is taller though in the straight back. That makes no sense to me. So yeah, I think I'll stick with the curvy and add that 1.5 inch in. And let's go ahead, cut things out and see how much of a disaster it's going to be. So I have cut out my pieces. I realized I didn't tell you what fabric I'm using, but this is kind of a lightweight cotton canvas on one side. To be honest, I was hoping to use it on both sides, but I did not buy enough. So I have blending in right with the surface of this because it's the same fabric. It's an unbleached canvas. It's a thicker, much thicker canvas than this stuff, but this is going to be the interior. That's going to be the exterior. Hopefully this is going to be enough because, to be honest, it is probably a little lighter weight than I should be using, but it's canvas, so hopefully that will work. So anyway, what I'm doing now is I'm attempting to transfer the boning channel markings onto the fabric pieces, specifically the inner fabric pieces right here. And it's proving difficult and annoying because basically the boning piece here, this is a separate piece, a whole separate template that you have to cut out with the boning channels on it. And it is only size 48, it says, except that it's not 48 because I cut out size 48 and this is not 48. So I don't know what size this is, but it's not 48. Yeah, I'm really confused about what size this is supposed to be because it is very much not 48. So anyway, you're supposed to match up the notches on the boning channel piece to like the notch that you have transferred onto here. But of course, I also lengthen this. So I am doing the notches based on from the top down, but I mean, my boning channel pattern, it's gonna have to be lengthened and in some cases curved. Like I think this is a bone, but it's full on curved, so I'm not sure how this is supposed to work. The other thing is, of course, I print in black and white because color ink is expensive and runs out really quickly. But in black and white, it's really, really hard to tell what is actually a piece of boning and what is not. I mean, obviously we can't have boning in an eyelet piece, so therefore that must not be boning. So I don't even know if this is showing up on here, but can you see that it's like slightly speckly here, here, and here? So those are boning pieces. So we've got one, then skip, then one, and then I think both of these are boning pieces actually together, and they both curve down here at the bottom. So I'm not sure how that works because I'm using synthetic whalebone. Like it doesn't really curve that way. So yes, we will cross that bridge when we come to it. But yeah, I'm gonna have to curve that out longer and more for the bottom down here. And I'm gonna have to figure out how to draw all of these on. Yeah, I'm really not sure. Because the other weird thing, of course, is that this space right here, this is not a normal measurement. It's 1.5 plus a 16th, otherwise known as 39 millimeters. I'm not sure how that happened, but it's very, very strange. So I have a lot of transferring to do, but I think I'm going to focus on the back piece and the front piece because if I can get those marked and ideally like put together like fronts to backs, then I think I can actually start doing the eyelets. I don't know yet if I'm doing hand eyelets or machine eyelets. It tells you to do the eyelets as like the last step. I'm not doing that because that's silly to me. Like, I don't know. Especially if I'm doing machine eyelets, I need to be able to twist this in my emerald, my Viking emerald machine, which does functional eyelets. So we'll see if it's something that I wind up sewing at the theater. That's one thing. I might have a mixture of eyelets, to be honest. Okay, I stand corrected. This is actually size 48 because I realized that this comes in here. I thought that it said that the seam allowances were smaller than they actually are, but these have really chonkin seam allowances like from here to here. I'm not sure what that is, but it's at least 5/8 of an inch, if not more. I'm not exactly sure how they expect you to transfer a curve from like this really thick paper onto this really thick fabric. But yeah, I have all my straight lines done on this piece here. These are 3/8 inches wide for the boning, and then it's a little bit wider for this channel that'll have the eyelets. This will wind up going away and it'll fold to the edge of the boning channel basically when it's attached to the other piece. This is a really big seam allowance. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of just north of 5/8 inches. And now I'm gonna, I guess, freehand this curve in here, and then I'll attempt to match it on the other side. By the way, I am adjusting the boning layout at least somewhat for the center front pieces because, as I mentioned before, I am making this a center front opening. So I'm using the historical pattern, which allows for that lacing here, but then the historical pattern gets joined together below that. And so like this portion becomes seam allowance instead of the part that goes behind to give strength and added stuff. Basically, you cut it right here. This top part folds over. It gives extra layers right here in the lacing area, whereas this becomes seam allowance. I'm not doing the cutting thing right here, so this is all going to be that extra strength layer section there, and I am going to be adjusting the boning channels here so that I can get eyelets all the way down. So for some reason, this eyelet channel starts smaller, even like by width, than the one for the back. I don't know why, but I've decided to just make it the same width, especially because if I'm doing this on the machine, I probably need a little extra width. So I am making this 3/8 plus the 3/8 plus a 6. Oh my God, that's impossible to say. 3/8 plus a 16th inch wide is the boning channel all the way down. And I have to adjust the boning channels here, obviously, to allow for that opening to continue there in the gap. In other words, not opening really, but the gap in the boning channels. And then these will all probably wind up pivoting out a little bit to accommodate that as well. So I have already drawn on those initial ones, because you have to have a bone on the other side of like the lacing where the eyelets go, because these two bones give that strength and structure, and then the other ones can fan out from there. So I'm going to go ahead and draw the other ones on. The other thing, of course, is that by lengthening this piece, as you can see, this wound up being a very different angle from this, so my boning channels are going to be different anyway. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead, draw boning channels on kind of willy-nilly there, but attempting to get as many as this one has. They will all come down and run into this like second bone. So there's two bones right here. I haven't drawn the second channel on yet, but basically this one is vertical and then all of these run into it. So that's what I have to draw on now. The way that I've decided to transfer these markings is that I'm taking a pin and then I'm drawing a dot where that pin goes into the canvas. So I have here the boning layout on top of the regular pattern piece, and I have them stacked and lined up. And then yeah, I'm putting the pin in, drawing a dot, and so basically from there, I wind up getting some lines that I can use. This is the eyelet that the strap will attach to, and then you can see there's dot there, and I've already made this boning channel here. This one was the one that I did first because this was the one that butts up right here, and it's the full one. So like this one comes to that point, which I stuck a pin in there, but it actually gets cut off, whereas this one you get like the full angle of that bone. So that's why I drew that on right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of the bones. Well, this took forever, but I have drawn on the what feels like 1,000 lines for all of the boning channels and the front. Like, it's almost dizzying to look at. I have also drawn on the eyelets here. So now I'm going to go ahead and put these together with the actual outside pieces, because this is basically the part that's going to be against my body, and that's why I didn't mind drawing lines all over it, because it's the inner side. So yeah, I have to put this right sides together with the outer fabric and then turn them so that it gets me a clean edge on this line where this bone is here. So if, like me, you have used heat erasable pen to mark all of your lines, what you're going to want to do once you have put your sides together like this is first I'm finger pressing. So I'm just literally pressing with my finger. Then I'm taking the very tip of my iron and using just the tip of the iron to press on that line right there. Then what I'm doing is I am flipping it, and you can see my lines are all still there, and I'm making sure that this is right on the edge, especially from the blue side, since that is the outer side. And again, I'm pressing with just the tip of the iron right along here and kind of spreading this out with my hand and pinning in place along the edges before I go and stitch the channels in place. So I have now done 3 of the 4 panels that are center fronts and center backs. They look really nice from this side. I mean, I've got all the threads that need to be clipped, but they look really nice. But unfortunately, when you flip it over to the front side, all of those little threads made like little knots right here. So hopefully I can clip those. So I have done all of the channels on these 3 pieces here. I marked the eyelets, so hopefully I can start on eyelets at the theater tomorrow. We'll see, to do those by hand. And I also went and I basted along the edges here where the seam allowance is, and I serged the very edge. I know that I read that you were supposed to do that on the back piece, so I did that here as well, but I think it said that you also do the sides of all of the other other pieces, like as you're doing boning channels, making sure that you're leaving the openings, like the top and the bottom in some cases, not in this one, but the top and the bottom open so that you can actually insert the boning, because otherwise you'd be screwed. So yeah, these are all ready for eyelets, and then I'll stick the bones in when I have time at home, because that is way too messy to do at the theater. Plus, I feel like it's going to be a lot easier to hold this without bones in, and what I don't have time to do at the theater, like I'm going to start with the fronts of the theater to do by hand, and if I, run out of things to do at the theater, I'm then going to do some of them probably by machine, and I can't do that if there's bones in them, but I can turn them around easily on my little Viking if there's not bones. So I will check in with you tomorrow and tell you if I got any eyelets done. We had our first rehearsal in the theater today, and I managed to finish one entire panel of hand-done eyelets. So I'm going to give you a little close-up look. They are not the neatest, but I did a buttonhole stitch on these eyelets. Some of them look nice, like that one looks pretty nice, but I was doing these kind of in the half dark, like without the house lights on, and so they're a little wonky, but I think overall they look pretty okay. Hopefully I will get at least this much done tomorrow. So I'm working now on drawing the boning channels in on the side front pieces, and again we have a whole lot of channels on here that are curved, which means I'm basically having to do them freehand. So I did my pin transfer method for all of the ends and all the ends down here. These are relatively straight lines. Well, they are straight lines, but then there's like a weird gap in the middle. So those I was just able to do with a ruler. Same with these ones right here. However, these 4 boning channels over here are all curves. And so I'm really having to do these totally freehand. I can't use the pin transfer method because I lengthened this. So it just doesn't line up with the bones that are drawn on here. So yeah, I basically am just drawing them freehand. I drew these and I kind of used the ruler as a guide to make sure that they were about 3/8 of an inch wide. And then over here, so this is the middle of 2 bones, and I decided it looks like, I don't know how well you'll be able to tell this, but it looks like this line is basically halfway between these bones and these bones. So I decided to just eyeball it and try to find the middle and draw it there, and then reach the end point that I knew was going to be there. You can tell there are weird things going on here. I'm going to have to figure that out and work that out. I think it was kind of like the length of where this goes versus where these dots are for endpoints, but I've drawn this in freehand. Now I'm going to do the 3/8 inch on either side of that to get those bones in, but you can tell it's very, very feathered how I drew it in to try to get that curve. So luckily this is the inside. Well, it took a while, but I was able to draw those in. They do look quite wonky, so hopefully they're all the right width and curve and everything. It's still weird to me that they are curved at all. And now it's time to go off to rehearsal and do more eyelets. So yesterday was day 2 of working on eyelets at rehearsal. I didn't manage quite as many of them yesterday, mostly just because they started to get really tedious, and also if you follow me on Instagram, which is also at Lady Rebecca Fashions, and you will know that one of the days I went and I posted a whole lot of content about potential Barbie cosplay ideas. That was yesterday. So I spent a lot of time on Instagram yesterday, answering people and going back and forth with people, and not nearly as much time sewing. So I have done all but the last 3 eyelets on the other front piece here. And my goal is, well, I mean, it's not a goal, it's gonna happen. I'm going to finish by hand for sure these last 3 eyelets, just so that the fronts both match. I had already threaded up my needle, and then they actually also said that we could leave rehearsal a little bit early, so that was part of it as well. If they hadn't, probably would have finished the last 3 eyelets. But all of these eyelets otherwise are done on the fronts, so that's awesome. Once I get these 3 done here, they'll be ready for the boning to go in. And I showed you yesterday that I was drawing the channels out on these side front pieces, so that is still left off where I was. I got half of it done, I got 1 piece done, and those have to be stitched down. I don't have any of the eyelets done on the center back pieces yet. So basically today is now Monday, which means that it is the start of a new week. So really all of this next stuff, this is gonna go into another vlog. So I think I'm actually going to go ahead and cut off this vlog here. As I warned you, stays are going to be super, super slow going, especially with me being at rehearsal for 50 hours a week. It's kind of eats up a lot of time. So Hopefully I will finish the stays next week. Keep your fingers crossed for me, because it would be really awesome to only have this be a 2-week thing, because I'm really excited to move on to the actual bodice. Of course, hoping that these stays actually fit. So stay tuned next week to see if the stays fit. Again, keep your fingers crossed for me. Keep me in your thoughts and prayers if you do that, because oh my gosh, this is a lot of work for these to potentially not fit. But thank you all so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube twice a week, with my sewing vlogs like this out on Tuesdays and other costuming content out on Saturdays, but I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below, or you can send me a super thanks right here on YouTube. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my Edwardian level patrons, Sharon and Mirage. Thank you all so much for joining me today. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!